So we first have to define what a variation is, and in the context of powerlifting, that would be any sort of close movement patterns to the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. So there are a couple of reasons why you'd want to apply variations to your training. The first one being to avoid burnout, especially in nowadays in terms of programming. There's a lot of coaches and a lot of people that coach themselves as well due to this influence that train very hyper-specific in a sense that they don't have very many movement variations in their training in the goal to get as strong as fast as possible, basically. Now, in the short term, this might be the case in specializing in powerlifting very, very quickly. However, this can absolutely lead to not only physical burnout because you are just sort of doing these same movement patterns over and over, which could be very taxing on your body, but also the mental burnout aspect of it, in which powerlifting can become very monotonous and boring because you're literally just doing 3 movements over and over. Now, along with this, there is also the concept of using a pivot block. Now, a pivot block is sort of like a deload. However, you are, in most cases, not even doing any sort of competition lifts. It's pretty much all variations of them. This can be extremely useful for avoiding burnout because you are sensitizing yourself to these these non-competition movements, which is sort of in turn like desensitizing yourself to the competition movements, so that when you can eventually come back to doing mostly competition lifts for powerlifting, it's a lot more fresh, not only mentally but also physically. Reason number 2 that you would want to use variations in your training would be to address movement pattern deficiencies, or more commonly called weaknesses. Now, these could present themselves in a couple different ways. The first one being actual weaknesses of the muscle group, that being that specific muscle group would be weaker relative to the other muscle groups involved in the movement, resulting in you failing reps at heavier lows because of it. However, there can also be a psychological side to this, where you don't have enough confidence in certain movement patterns. So, for example, especially in a lot of beginner athletes, they tend to fear spinal flexion in the deadlift, or what they perceive as spinal flexion in the deadlift. Now, this perceived fear sort of leads to them really giving up on the rep when they start to perceive that their back is like rounded, or it is rounding. And that type of thing can be addressed through taking them through that range of motion and progressing that range of motion so that they can build more confidence there, and which can lead to, and especially in the short term, just not necessarily perceiving as a bad thing and being able to finish reps. Now, the third reason that you would want to use variation in your training is essentially to gain more muscle. And this can especially be useful in people that have sort of like weird levers or very non-advantageous levers for certain lifts, like someone who has like super long legs and a short torso for the squat. The squat is generally going to be harder for them, and due to this, it is very likely that they will be able to get in more volume using variations, especially if they're a little bit further from the competition lifts. Now, this can be beneficial because in almost all cases, a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle, so therefore it is indirectly increasing your ability to push weight and be stronger. Now, I hope this gave you guys a general understanding of the utility of variations in a powerlifting program, but don't worry, I'll get into more specifics next video, where I'll be going into specific instances and what to do with movement variations, or potentially what could help with them.